What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. So you've decided to put in a garden. Either you've already had one and you're deciding to continue that the next year, or you've been dreaming about one and you just decided that this year is the year. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad that you're deciding to put in a garden. You've come to the right place. Obviously, our videos are a wealth of information, and if you've never seen them before, hey, decide to stay a while, hit the subscribe button, and we have lots more gardening content coming out. But if you're thinking about actually putting in a garden, one of the things you're going to need are seeds. That is, if you don't want to go with plants, which can be very expensive and rather limited in their selection. So one of the nice things when starting seeds is the fact that there's limitless possibilities. If you go to a greenhouse and garden center, you're limited to what they're willing to grow because they're a business at the end of the day. And I mean, I can't blame them, but also it is frustrating when you go to the greenhouse and there's like 4 varieties of tomatoes. Well, what happens when you want to grow 10 or 20 varieties of tomatoes? Or what happens if the only varieties they carry are hybrids and you want to grow a nice, beautiful heirloom beefsteak tomato? Well, that's where seeds come in. And when it comes to seeds, there's tons of options. Now, when you're starting seeds, a lot of people want to kind of look at the wide variety of seeds that exist out there, and they end up making a few mistakes. And so this episode might seem a little counterintuitive because we are a seed store. You're in the MIgardener seed store. And we started this mission of basically providing not only free information, but also garden supplies to people that need them. And a lot of people will make these mistakes. And I want to prevent you from making the same mistakes because it can be not only frustrating, but also discouraging. So with that being said, in today's episode, we're going to go through the different mistakes that I see gardeners making and how to prevent them. Let's go. All right, so the first mistake I see way too many gardeners making, which might seem like a good thing for me, but actually it's something that I want to prevent, and that is I want to prevent you from overspending. Now, being a seed company, this is something that is obviously a nice thing to have business, but I want the right type of business. I want you to end your shopping experience knowing that you not only got a good deal, but that you're going to be able to have a positive return on what you're growing. If you are growing, say, $50 worth of tomatoes, but it costs you $500, what is the point? You're actually spending money and you're not seeing a return on your initial investment. Part of MIgardener's mission has always been to make gardening more fun and more affordable. And in order to make it more affordable, I want you guys to go in with a budget. Having a budget in mind before you start shopping is so important with anything, but especially when you see this huge wall of seeds or you're shopping online over at MIgardener.com, and you see just the pages and pages of seeds, make sure you go in with kind of a budget, pick out the things that you really like, read the descriptions, see which things you kind of really want to grow, see which things you really need to grow to have the garden that you want, and then from there, you can pare down your options. It does not do you any good whatsoever to overbuy seed, because the second mistake that you people make is they overbuy seed for more space than they even have in their garden. So as I said, the second biggest mistake I see a lot of gardeners making is buying seed that they don't have space for. This can take a couple different forms. For instance, we have a 2,000 square foot garden, and you can fit a lot in that 2,000 square feet, but I can't fit everything. And so I can grow things like pumpkins if I want to, watermelons if I want to. I can grow peas, beans, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce, whatever I want. But if I'm growing in containers, that is a confined space. Or if I'm growing in like an apartment garden on my balcony, that's a confined space. Or even if my garden space is not 2,000 square feet, but is say 500 square feet, right? The size of your garden is the confines of your garden, but also the type of garden that you have is also a potential restriction. If you have containers, you can't necessarily grow as much in containers as you can in a raised bed. And in a big raised bed, you can grow a lot of things, but if the size of your garden, if the boundaries of your garden prohibit that, well then you're still limited. And I want you to take that into consideration, because if you grow in containers and you look at the beautiful watermelon selection, we got a great one by the way. If you look at the watermelons, I don't care how big your space is, watermelons just don't do well in containers. They just don't thrive in containers. Unless of course you've got like a big wine barrel and it's like 50 gallons, which not a lot of people have. Generally, containers are going to be something between 5 and 10 gallons. Watermelons are not going to thrive in containers. And I'd much rather you say, man, that's beautiful, and dream about it. Dream about when you have more space. Dream about when you can get out of containers and move into like raised beds or like a little community garden, something like that. Dream about it, put it in your wish list, but don't check it out. Instead, I'd much rather you say, all right, I'm going to be realistic with my space, how I'm growing and what I'm able to grow. Instead, pick out things like might be some herbs, might be some thyme, sage, oregano, basil. It could be some lettuce, some cilantro, carrots. We have a container growing guide on everything you can grow in containers. I mean, heck, you can pick tomatoes that grow well in containers, but there's just some things that just don't do well. And unfortunately, people get hung up buying those things, and that adds to the cost of your garden, and you're not going to get a return from it. So just make sure that you're not buying things that you don't have space for, and being realistic with what space you actually do have. All right, and the third mistake I see way too many gardeners making is worrying about growing zones. Now, growing zones, as we've done a full video on, is basically one of the biggest misconceptions that the gardening community holds. And people will always ask, can I grow tomatoes in my growing zone? Can I grow peppers in my growing zone? What can I grow in my growing zone? Growing zones only apply to perennials. So if you're growing something like a tomato that gets killed off by the frost, it's not a perennial. You don't need to worry about it. It has nothing to do with your growing zone. A growing zone is basically different regions. They are bands overlaid on a map that the USDA puts out. And essentially what that tells you is your average coldest temperature throughout winter. So right now we're experiencing winter. We're not growing a garden, but what is growing outside are the perennials. Perennials are things that come back. They're plants that come back every single year. And so since there is winter going on right now, we want to make sure that the perennials we plant are going to be zone hardy to our zone. Prime example, asparagus. So we've got some asparagus here, or even artichokes for that example. Artichokes, asparagus, two different crops. And what you'll see, if you have a good reliable seed source like MIgardener.com, will tell you the growing zones. Perennial to zone 3 through 9 on asparagus. With artichokes, they're perennial zone 7 through 10. And if you're growing these, you need to know what your growing zone is. These are important to know what your growing zone is, but these are only a small sample size of all the vegetables you could be growing. You could be growing tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, carrots, peas, beans, basil, it doesn't matter. 95% of the crops that you're going to be looking at have no bearing whatsoever on your growing zone. 3.5 to this is, the rest of those crops fall within what is called your growing season. And growing season is different from growing zone because that is how many days you have between your last frost date in the spring and the first frost date in the fall. That is how many days you have to be growing that crop. There's no winter during that period. That is your growing season. And so you can grow things if you've got, say, 90 days in your growing season. Pull out the back of a packet, it'll show you how many days it takes to mature. That's how many days it takes. And if you've got, say, 90 days to, from your last frost date to your first frost date, 90 days in between, you pull out a crop that says takes 60 days to mature, you can grow it. It doesn't matter if you're living in North Pole, Alaska, or you're living down in, Tallahassee, Florida. Doesn't matter where you're at in the world. All that matters is the days that you have between your last frost date and your first frost date. And that's what's going to dictate 95% of the seeds that you're going to grow. Now, you do need to know how many days that is, and that's very simple. Simply go to a site like, just name dropping the Farmer's Almanac, because I know that's a good example. Pull up just type in your zip code, and what it'll tell you is your last frost date and your first frost date. And what you do is you simply take the amount of days in between the two. Just do the math. Maybe it'll pick like a big city near you if you live in a small city. But if you live in a place like, for us, it would pull up Detroit. Detroit is the closest, the nearest big city near us. And it's going to tell us how many days we have to grow. That is what you can pick from. But it still doesn't limit you. Because let's say you have 100 days in your growing season and you say, well, shoot, this pepper takes 120 days. What you can do is you can start it early. That's why indoors we typically start seeds that take longer to mature. Things like peppers and tomatoes, herbs. We have lots of videos on how to start seeds indoors, but that's the only reason why you start seeds indoors, is to give yourself that little extra wiggle room in between your first frost date and your last frost date. It gives you additional days onto your growing season. So if you grow something for 20 days indoors and you have 100 days of your growing season, you magically just have 120 days in your growing season. It's a quick little tip for you guys to actually increasing the amount that you can grow. But that's very important is to go into it knowing how many days you have, basically how many frost-free days you have to grow. So that's mistake number 3. On to number 4. All right, mistake number 4 is not finding a friend to partner with when buying seeds. Check it out. So let's say you have this beautiful wall of tomatoes. There's like 40 different varieties that you want to try, but maybe you don't have $80 to spend on your tomato seeds. Well, what if you found a friend? The really nice thing that I can say about MIgardener seeds is we always pride ourselves in giving you more than you probably should need for a garden. This means you could just stockpile them if you don't use them all, keep them cool, dark, and dry, and they're gonna last. But if you find a friend, you take, say 20 bucks. Okay, I got 10, a little more broke than I thought I was. Take 10 bucks. Okay, look, I got $10 to spend. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 packets of seed. But what if you found a friend? And now that friend pitches in $10 as well. You got 20 bucks. So now you can get all these, and you found a friend to bring in 10 bucks. You brought your 10 bucks in, you got $20 worth of seed, but now here's what you do. You split them in half. You still only spent $10, but not only that, you got your free shipping, because we do free shipping on seed orders of $12 or more, but also, I'll pick that up, that's important nowadays, but you got 10 packs of seed for $20. You got your free shipping, and take half these seeds, you get half, they get half. You get half, they get half. We're talking 25 seeds. You could split this in half, and you guys can fight over who gets that odd seed, but you're still getting like 12 seeds. 12 seeds, 12 tomato plants, that's unbelievable. And then you have the opportunity to split these with a friend and maybe even multiple friends. I've known many gardening groups, they get together, they pool their money together, they pool together 200, 300 bucks, and then they end up splitting everything, but your cost is only like 5, 10 bucks. And it's a great way to do it because it allows you to try so many different varieties, but split the seeds in a pack. So don't make the mistake. Don't feel like you just have to afford everything because that's unrealistic. Find a friend, go in 50-50, go in, 33-33, but if you find another person, and split that up, split that cost up so you can try more variety, and that gives you more ability to see what you might really like to try. Because sometimes you want to try something, if it's not in the budget, you say, I don't know if I'm really gonna like it. And that might have been the variety that just changed your world, absolutely overturned your life and flipped it upside down, and you missed out on it because you couldn't afford it because you couldn't find a friend to partner with. All right, the 5th and final mistake I see so many gardeners making is buying seed that you don't ever intend on growing. It could be because maybe you bought it and then you changed your mind later on, or maybe it's because you really don't like what you're growing. I mean, if you don't eat artichokes, don't grow artichokes. Like, it's a really pretty packet, and the seeds inside are gonna grow an artichoke, and you're gonna get what you're expecting from this packet. But if you don't like to eat artichokes, and you know you don't like artichokes, don't buy artichokes. Now that seems fairly simple, obviously. We would all hope that you wouldn't buy things that you don't plan on eating, but I find a lot of gardeners will buy something just because it looks pretty, or just because it was on sale, or just because it was like the only one left, right? Like everything else was sold out, so I just settled for something. Don't necessarily settle for something, or don't necessarily buy something on a whim. Have a plan when you go in and actually know what you eat. Like, I know from my experience that I don't really grow as many pole beans. I find that I like to grow bush beans. Same flavor, you're still getting same bean, same use, but I find it's just more enjoyable to, some people would find this crazy, but I like to see a nice full bed of like bushy green beans and harvest on my knees rather than, pick from like a singular vine. That's just my personal perspective. So that dictates which beans I grow. I wouldn't buy a pole bean necessarily, or I might, but I might not buy as many because it's just not how I necessarily grow. Same thing with corn, right? So you have decorative corns, you have flint corn, you have popcorn, you have sweet corn, lots of different varieties of corn. If you don't, for instance, mill your own cornmeal, it's great, by the way, you should totally try it, awesome. But if you don't mill your own corn, why would you buy a flint corn? Well, you might buy it because it's pretty. Like for instance, you've got the Oaxacan green dent corn. It's a really pretty corn. You could use it as decoration, but that's fine. Go into it knowing you're going to use it as decoration. Go into it knowing you don't have any expectation of milling it into flour to make like cornmeal and grits and stuff like that. So just having that kind of that awareness of your intent behind why you're buying something is important. Another just common one that we hear, like with corn, because that's a common one, is like, well, I bought it because it was pretty, but I don't have any other use for it. Another one are things like Brussels sprouts, cabbages, things that beets. People are like, I don't even like the taste of beets, but I bought it because it looked pretty. If you don't like to eat it, you're going to end up just sitting on the packets, or you'll grow it and you'll end up wasting the produce that comes from your garden. And again, my objective is not to sell you a seed. That if my objective was just to sell you seeds, I would tell you all day long, grow everything, grow this, grow that, and I would basically spend your money for you. But that'd be very disingenuous of me. I'd much rather you have a good experience with the seeds that you buy, have more fun gardening, and see a return on the things that you're growing from your garden. That way, you're encouraged to start a garden next year. So that's all the tips that I have for you when shopping for seed. I hope you guys enjoyed. And obviously, it would be without saying, check out MIgardener.com. We have the largest selection of heirloom, organic, and non-GMO vegetable seeds. This is like just a small sample size of everything that we have. So make sure you go check it out. All of our seeds are $2 a pack. We do free shipping on seed orders of $12 or more. And it's something that we take a lot of pride in. So make sure you go check it out. I'll have links in the description box down below to where you can go check that out. And yeah, so as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel reminding you to grow big or go home. We'll catch you guys later. See ya. Bye.